All right, so I work at NIST as a web developer. I've worked in the private sector previously, and I've been working with Drupal for about 4.5 years professionally, with some personal experience before that. So, about you, if you're in this room, you are comfortable with Drupal, and you are comfortable with PHP. You will need both to do module development. You don't need to be an expert, but you do need to know your way around some code. So, what are we going to cover? Well, first off, we're going to talk about what modules are, why you should write them, what makes up a module, the hook system, actually the event system, a little bit in Drupal 8, some resources, and get to some questions. And actually after that, I'm going to be doing some coding. So, before we get started, the very first thing you should do before you write custom code is check Drupal.org. Check Drupal.org. Because you do not want to write something that somebody has already done. Also, Google it too, just to make sure. Sometimes you can find a fork or a patch or something like that. The best code is the code you don't have to write. So I assume that if you're going to be writing a module, you've already gone through that step. Also, they told me to mention HackPad in the speaker notes, so I think it's like a note sharing thing. So check out HackPad. All right, going on with this theme of what you should do. So check core first. If it can be done in core, definitely use core. Obviously, the most amount of people are going to be using core. If it can't be done in core, do it in contrib. If it can't be done in contrib, check if there's a patch. If it can't be done in contrib with a patch, then you can fork it. And finally, write it yourself. All right, so now that we've got the disclaimers out of the way, my lawyers are happy, your lawyers are happy. So let's talk about first what's new in Drupal 8. So first off, there's a concept called MVC. Basically, it's a code pattern. You can look it up. There's actually a link here on the Symfony site. It walks through taking a flat or procedural PHP blogging app all the way to Symfony 2. And along the way, it works through basic MVC patterns. So this was a really helpful link for me when I got started to figure out, what is MVC all about. Next up, there's some PSR standards. So there's basically a group of PHP developers called PHP Fig. They write standards. So the one that's really important for Drupal 8 is called auto-loading. Basically, if you're used to old school PHP, you have to do require or include. So auto-loading, what that allows you to do is instead of having a bunch of require statements or include statements, you basically list the packages that your class needs, and the autoloader will say, if it's not already loaded, go ahead and load it up. So you don't get those nasty errors of, file already included, can't include it again. There's also Composer and Packagist. So Composer is like a package manager, similar to NPM. Packagist is the actual website or package repository. So this will come into play again for Drupal 8 and also Symfony. All right, so what are modules? First off, they're the building blocks of Drupal. They can also be functionality, they can be frameworks, they can be APIs. So when I say frameworks, think of media or any of these other modules where CTools actually is probably a better example, where you have a module, but a lot of other modules extend it. So if you write your own modules, you can actually incorporate something like that to where some other developers can extend it. So why should you write modules? First off, code organization. It allows you to cleanly separate your code so you can enable it, disable it. This is helpful when you're developing large sites. You can put it behind kind of a feature flag. So once it's ready to roll out, you just turn it on production and you're good to go. It also, modules, because of Drupal's API, it allows you to extend other people's code. So in other words, you don't hack other people's code. And this is an important one. It does not hack core. That's a big deal. There's a page dedicated to it. Basically, it's saying, don't change Drupal core, extend it. Because if you go to upgrade, your changes will be lost and it's just bad practice. It also allows you to share your code. Because your code is written as a module, it's easy to put it on Drupal.org or GitHub or anything like that. And people can pull down your code, they can put it on their site. And again, it also allows your code to be extendable. So, modules and themes. Well, ostensibly, modules make things work and themes make things pretty. So you should have your logic, ideally, in your modules, and your presentation stuff in your themes. Again, some buzzwords here: separation of concerns, decoupling, synergy, unidirectional data flow. That's not, I'm kidding with here. Flyweight pattern, yeah, that's also a joke. One guy gets it. So let's talk about what actually makes up a module. This is Drupal 7. So at the minimum, you're going to have a folder directory in your code base designated by the machine name of the module. So for example, sites all modules, dev or custom, and then my underscore module. You're going to have an info file, which is machine name.info. And you're also going to have a module file, .module. And that's, again, machine name.module. Quick note, Drupal's module scanning is recursive. So what I mean by that is you can and should add subfolders within the modules directory. So for example, sites all modules contrib, sites all modules custom. That's just standard practice, and it's a best practice. Also, if you get into features too. So in Drupal 8, it's a little bit different. First off, you'll notice that we're working in the top-level modules directory. All core stuff has been moved to the core directory. So you'll see now people are working in /modules. Again, recursive directory structure scanning. So you're going to have your module directory, an info YAML file. So instead of the .info files, you're going to see YAML files popping up, which is essentially JSON without the curly braces. A routing YAML file. And routing in this case, when I say routing, I mean URL, like, for this path, do this thing. A composer file, which is, again, getting back to composer, that lists your package dependencies. So if you need other people's code, you can put a composer file in there, and it'll pull it down. You have the module file, again, machine name of the module. And lastly, you're going to have some controller files. So again, controllers in the MVC, it's for a URL or a path. The controller will get your data and get your view. So, all right, so info files in D7 and D8. Again, this is .info in D7, YAML file in D8. It describes your module. So at the minimum, it should have the name, the description, the package, the type in Drupal 8, and core version. So first up, name. So this is the user-friendly name of your module. So views, chaos tools, etc. It's not going to be the machine name. Next up, we've got the description. This is where you describe your module. This is going to show up on the admin pages and such. So again, this is the user-friendly description. We have package. This groups your modules together. So if you've gone on the admin module page where you see, views or search or anything like that, this is how you would group those together. So, for example, package, user interface, or what have you. Next up, we've got core. So this is the major version of Drupal core. So 7.x, 8.x. Not minor version, so just the major version. Info file version. So this is for the actual module itself, but you don't actually fill this in if your module is going to be on D.O, because D.O has its own versioning system. So this is more just for custom code that's never going to be released to the community. Again, by convention, it's major version hyphen module version number. So, for example, 7.x-1.0. Okay, dependencies. So this is where you'd list all the things that your module depends on. You don't have to do it recursively, so you just have to list your direct dependencies. So for example, just views, not views and ctools and everything else, because that would be insane. In Drupal 7, it's this pseudo array syntax for the info file, and in D8, it's YAML. Configure. Okay, so configure, if you have an admin configuration page for your module, this property will allow you to specify the URL for that. So if you're on the admin page, you'll see like permissions and configure in the dropdown. This is how you'd set that dropdown link. So in D7, it's going to be the actual path or URL. In D8, it's going to be the route name, which we'll get to later. Type for D8, that just indicates the extension type. So for example, module, theme, profile. And here's a quick example, it's a little hard to see, of a D7 info file. I'll have some code later. and by comparison, here's D8. The syntax highlighting is a little weird, but you get the gist. Okay, so the module file. The module file is the file that always loads for enable modules. And I stress that point because if you have 100 modules on a site, 200 modules on a site, every module file is going to get loaded for every request. Given that, it should contain as little code as possible. And when you can, use callback hooks to store your code and include files so that for a given request, you only bootstrap as little as possible and load up code as needed. Drupal 8 still uses module files for hooks. However, hooks are not used as much, which we'll get into a little later on. All right, so the hook system. What is the hook system? Well, the hook system, it provides access points to Drupal's response cycle. It allows you to hook in to a response and edit it on the fly. So it's used by modules and themes. You can think of it sort of like a roll call. So for example, if we were ordering a pizza in this room, I'm Drupal core, and I have a hook called pre-order. So I go, okay, pre-order, what toppings do we want? And then all of you could have a hook that says, oh, I want pepperoni, or I want pineapple because you're a monster. Kidding. If you like pineapple, that's fine. But that's, ostensibly, it's like a roll call. So yeah, so at certain points, at established hooks, modules can say, I have a function, and Drupal or other modules will call all those functions. I actually have a Drupal 7-like hook example on GitHub that actually works through the low-level mechanics if you're very interested. Okay, so there's an edge case here, particularly with D7, is modules with no hooks. The use case I've seen is loading up a PHP library in memory. Again, because you can enable and disable modules, it makes it a little cleaner to do, as opposed to throwing it into the code base and doing an include somewhere. So remember here, again, that for module files, the contents will be loaded into global scope. So that's one use case. Okay, so resources. First off, Google. Drupal.org has a module development guide. I put this at the end because obviously if you knew about this, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have to come to my session. So there's also best practices, API reference, which when you get into module development, you're going to be hitting a lot. Drupal Answers, which is a Stack Exchange site, kind of like Stack Overflow. And there's actually a Stack Overflow tag for Drupal. So I hit these a lot. Mainly Google will lead me to the right API reference, although you can obviously search on the API reference directly. Okay, so quick note, helper functions. So this is more for Drupal 7, because once you get into Drupal 8, you're going to want an interactive debugger. But for Drupal 7, Devel has a DPM function. So what this will do is it uses Drupal's messaging API to queue up a message, and it'll help you pretty print objects and arrays, which is very helpful. When I say pretty print, I don't mean like, it's pre-formatted with indentations. You can actually expand properties and what have you. So this is very helpful. Again, it's a little old school. There's also print R, and I mentioned this one because we were working on some command line stuff, and you can actually use print R within your PHP code to print to the command line, which if you're doing Drush stuff and you just need something simple, is very helpful. Okay, so before we get into the coding stuff, which is the real meat of the presentation, does anybody have any questions about what we just covered? Okay, cool. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to breeze right through it. So again, GitHub links. These slides will be posted. They're actually online right now, but I'll post these slides. So here's an example, very simple example, D7 module. Same for D8, and then here's a sandbox module if you want to look at something with a little more substance. This is for D7. I'll work on a D8 one as I have time. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and fire up some code. So what I have here is a Drupal 7 site and Drupal 8 site. These are, I'm using Dev Desktop, which I recommend. Just personally, I love it. It builds your stack. It's you can pull distros, so it makes things a lot easier. So I've got Dev Desktop, again, a fresh install of D7 and D8. I use SQL Pro for my database stuff. Terminal, you're going to want to get friendly with Terminal. And then Sublime for D7. I really recommend Sublime for D7 because it's a very good text editor and you're not doing a lot of object-oriented stuff. With D8, though, you're going to want a full-fledged IDE. So I use PHP Storm, but you can use Eclipse or NetBeans. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So here's my example site. So first off, I'm going to go to the module page. So we can see here's, again, base install. So let's go ahead and write a module. All right, so here is our site's all modules directory. So first off, I am going to create a new folder called custom, if I can type correctly. All right, so within modules, I've got custom. All right, so now let's create a new folder called mat. So this will be my module. So we're going to write the mat module. Very original, I know. All right, so mat, we're going to need two things. First off, the mat.info and mat.module. Okay, so we've got our bare bones right here. So let's go ahead and fill it out. And for the sake of time, I am just going to look at my example. So mat.info, so I'm going to copy this right here. Again, this is what we talked about in the presentation: name, description, core, package, and version number. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now what I'll do here is I'll go back to our D7 site. I would do this with Drush, but I guess for simplicity's sake, I'll show you how to do it through the UI. So if we scroll down here, you'll see here in our package mat, we've got mat's module. So it's not going to do anything, but just for the sake of it, I'll go ahead and enable it. So our module, we've created it. Here's our description. So it's not doing anything, but at least Drupal knows about it. All right, so let's do something neat. All right, so let's create a page programmatically, which is a little trivial, but still gives you the idea. So Drupal's menu system, especially in D7, is also its router. So if you want to create a page in a module, you have to use hook menu. In D8, that's done through routing. So, all right, let's see here. Code comments. Again, just for the sake of time, because I want to focus on D8, Drupal 8, I'm going to take this boilerplate and I'll walk us through it. Okay, so all right, so here's some boilerplate. All right, so implements hook menu. So again, hook menu is Drupal's, let's pull up the API docs. Drupal. All right, Drupal hook menu. So if we take a look at the API docs on Drupal, we can see it allows you to register paths. It lists some properties, some example code. Normally, if they don't list example code in here, you can find it in comments. So for example, right here, people will write comments. So if you don't find it in the API docs directly, check out the comments. So here it is. All right, let's look through some of the properties. So items, so this is going to be the route. So in this case, it'll be, or path, I guess, in D7. It'll be /mat. So if I wanted it to be like mat, something else would be mat something else. Right, so then it'd be /mat/ something else. All right, so then for this path, we're going to have mat's page as the title. Page callback. All right, so this is going to be the function that is called for this path. This is what's going to generate the content. Access arguments. So this is permission stuff. So we're basically going to say check that the user can access content for this route path. If they can't, show access denied. All right, so this is what I was talking about includes. Again, since this file is going to get loaded for every request, we're going to create an include file. And this is where our function's actually going to live. And type here, if we go back to the API docs, menu callback is simply a register a path. So it's not going to be in the menu system. We just want to show a page. So there's some options here. So, okay, so we're going to need some other stuff. So let's create a new folder. You'll notice here that I have the file is include /mat.mat paging. So let's create an includes directory. Again, by convention, you could have it top level, but your include should go in a includes directory. So I've got my includes directory, and now I'm going to create the, let me just copy it. So my mat inc file. Okay, so by convention, again, since Drupal 7 is procedural, I have prefixed my module name to the name of the file. So if this was your module, it would be your module, right? So it just it prevents collisions. So, and it's also easier that way. Okay, so we're going to create my include file, and for the sake of time, again, I am going to take a look at this boilerplate code. Okay, so it's very simple, very simple. Here's our boilerplate code. So callback for the mat path. And what we see here is basically this function gets called and it will return this content. So I'm going to work through this a little bit more. First, I am going to clear cache. So drush, now I will use drush, cc all. So really get familiar with drush. If you're going to do anything enterprise or large scale or where you have multiple servers, you're going to need to know drush. With dev desktop, it comes bundled, but if you use Composer, you can install it globally too. So drush is your friend. The reason why I'm clearing cache is Drupal knows about our module, but it does not know, I forgot to say it does not know about this hook. So when you clear cache, you'll make Drupal aware of any new hooks. So unfortunately, I need to re-clear cache now that I've saved. Okay, so we're clearing cache. Drupal should learn about this hook right here. So if we go to our D7 site, close out, actually I can just go here. So /mat, what we should see is the mat page. Okay, so we see the mat page. All right, so this is Mat's page. Quick note on hook menu. You'll notice that I'm returning the content here. You're not actually going to render it here. This is a good point, because so if I were to hit print, it's not going to go through the theme layer at all. So if I do this, you'll see it's not going through the theme layer. So this callback function should return the content, not actually render it. Okay, so this, again, is a very simple Drupal 7 module. The way you'd go from here, once you get more comfortable, you can actually look at the core stuff or contrib stuff. So if we take a look at modules, let's take a look at book. So for example, book.module, right? So we can see this implements hook help, right? So really what you want to do is find a module that kind of does what you're looking for and look up code examples. Again, you're not always going to find a blog post or documentation about how to do your exact thing. So what I've found I've been doing a lot recently is reverse engineering what other people have done. And again, a lot of it is just, look at the right hook and then call some functions. And then you can actually also, sometimes you'll get lucky and be like Drupal, hook for every page. So if you kind of do that, you can find, kind of hunt and peck. So you can see hook init here will run for every request. It'll be one of the first hooks run. So that's kind of the methodology that I work through. Again, reversing the code, looking at contrib. Actually, while I'm doing this, once you get into working on other people's code, you're going to need to write patches. So patches. All right, here's a quick rundown of patches. So let's say I'm not Matt anymore. I am John Allen. And I need to patch this. So here's a quick rundown. So let's say Matt is a contrib module. So the way you do that, and there's documentation on D.O, but let's just say simply, I'm going to get a clean Git repo real quick. So okay, so I'm just getting the repo clean. All right, so what we need to do is if you're working on your site, what you should honestly do is actually create a repo just for the module. But in a pinch, you can do it this way. I'm going to do it this way for the sake of time. So let's say I want to patch this. So what I'm going to do is branch. And actually, while we're talking about it, always branch. Never work on master. Master should be production-ready code. Okay, so got that out of the way. New branch. So let's figure out what we want to do. Let's say we want Matt to now be John Allen. All right, so I'm not going to save that, but let's say that's what we want to do. So I'll write a patch. So the John Allen path. All right, so this is my branch. So we created a branch. We're going to change this to John Allen. Again, I'm using source tree because it's got a great UI. You'll see that I've invested a lot in my command line. So I use source tree because it's helpful. And you shouldn't worry about just because it's a UI, it's not cool enough. So I like source tree and I like the command line. But all right, so we've got our change here, John Allen. So if we go back to our Drupal 7 site, let's clear cache. John Allen, save. Okay, clear cache. Okay, all right. So if we go to John Allen, it shows the same thing. So to show I'm not lying, I'll say this is John's page. All right. So now we see, all right, we've patched it. We know what we want. So let's go ahead. We're in our John Allen branch. Let's commit these changes. So better. This is a terrible commit message, but if you do this in production code, everyone will hate you. So what we're going to do now is diff the two branches. So let's see here, git diff. Let's see, we want to do master and then John Allen path. John Allen path. I'll move this up here. So let me just double check if that's right. Okay, cool. So that is right. Q. All right. So what you do then is actually let's change into my module directory folder. So cd sites all modules custom mat. Yeah, cool. We're in our module directory folder. So we're going to git diff. So what this is going to do is find the changes between the two branches, and then we're going to redirect this output to a patch file. So make module great again. .patch. Okay, so we do that, and what you'll see here is in our code base, actually I can look at it in source tree. So you'll see here it created a diff. Now the one reason why you're going to want to do this in its own repo is you'll see this patch file, everything is absolute to my repository. And what you really need is it to be absolute to just the module. So instead of it being sites all modules custom, it just needs to be mat. But anyway, that's the rough rundown of how you create a patch file. From here, look on Drupal.org. You post it in a comment. And again, you can see here, here's the diff. Take away this line, add this line. Take away this line, add this line. Okay, so that's a quick rundown of patching. I'm hoping that eventually Drupal will go to a pull request model, but for now we're going to have to write patch files. All right, let's move on to D8 because that's really where the meat is. So I'm going to minimize some of this stuff, clear. So we're going to move, again, to an interactive debugger. So PHP Storm with Xdebug is very valuable. And again, recommending Dev Desktop because you can look up Dev Desktop Xdebug. So when I say interactive debugger, what I mean is you can pause the execution of a request and take a look at the variables and all the settings. So there's instructions specifically for PHP Storm and Dev Desktop, which is helpful, but there's probably instructions out there too for Eclipse or NetBeans. I've used NetBeans in the past with Xdebug. So, all right, so we've got our project, our Drupal 8 project. I'm going to kind of go ahead and close out of that. All right, so we're at Drupal 8. We've got our Drupal 8 project. Let's see here, sites. All right, so what we're going to use now, though, there is, for Drupal 8, there's a Drupal console, which is related but not the same thing as Drush. I think it's still getting fleshed out, like what does what, but Drupal 8 console is, it provides scaffolding tools. So you'll notice that for Drupal 7, I had to write or manually create those directories. For Drupal 8, using the console, you just type a command and it'll do that for you. Almost there. All right, so Drupal 8. All right, cool. So we are in our project root. Looks like, actually, based on this, something's not clean. So I'm just going to clean this up. It's my workspace. I'll ignore that for now. All right, so we have got our blank Drupal 8 site, no content created. So let's go ahead and write a module. So Drupal console, Drupal generates :module, the module. All right, so what this is going to do is walk me through the steps of, again, scaffolding a custom module. So I'm going to call it the mat module, very creative again. It's going to have some defaults in parentheses. So in this case, we're going to stick with just mat as the machine name. Module path, you'll notice again, top level, modules, and then custom. And description, it is in fact an awesome module, so we'll go with that. Package, let's do mat instead of custom because, you know, I'm vain, I guess. So core version, Drupal 8, that's fine. Do you want to generate a module file? Let's do yes. Actually, it defaults to that. Features, no, we don't want to get into that quite yet or ever. Composer file, we'll do yes. We're not going to depend on any packages, but again, this gets back to if there's a package on Packagist that you need, you could add it here. I don't have any dependencies, so no. Confirm generation, yes. Okay, I know that seemed like a lot of steps as I'm walking through it, but once you get used to it, you can just bang it out. So it's a lot better. All right, so we see here it's went ahead and created these files. So let's take a look. So custom, you can see I was doing this last night, so ignore test. So what do we have here? Well, first off, we've got our info file, info.yaml, our module file, which has help book, and also our composer file, which again has some boilerplate. So let's go ahead and do a route real quick. So again, in Drupal 7, you were using hook menu to do paths. In Drupal 8, you're going to do routes. So we're going to need a couple files. We're going to need a routing file. So let's see if I do this right. It is new file mat. So the machine name dot routing. So machine name dot routing dot YAML. All right. So if we take a look here, actually I'm going to cheat. So test routing. Yeah. Okay. It's boilerplate. So we've got some boilerplate here. So this is our routing file, and again, this is like for a given request, do this. So first off, that namespace is wrong, so this is the mat. Test page is fine. So this is, remember when I said in configure, you were going to use the route name and not the URL? This bit right here is the route name. So if we actually pop back to our slides for a second, wherever you see a route name, that's how you find it out. So configure. Yeah, so you can see here my module.admin page. So again, this is the route name. You're not dealing with URLs. The nice thing about that is if you ever change the path, you don't have to change it in a million places. So let's change the path to mat. So this would be the URL. All right, so controllers. We're getting into controllers. So first thing we're going to also need to add before we fill this out is a source directory. So this gets back to auto-loading, PSR4. Basically, it's going to map a namespace to a directory structure. A namespace is essentially, you can think of it as logical directories for your code. So you'll see here that this controller is in Drupal test controller, test controller. So the namespace here would just be Drupal test controller. What that allows you to do is not have a million character function names, because in Drupal 7 you'll see it's my module underscore blah, 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 blah. So namespaces allow you to, again, create logical as opposed to, directories on the disk. Logical organization. And again, it maps it to directory structures so it knows where to find it. So let's create a source directory, again, PSR4 style. So directory src. We're going to want a controller. Can't remember if it's plural. Okay, singular. Controller, actually, it could probably be whatever I say, but I'll go with controller. Controller helps if you spell right. All right, so we've got our source, our controller directory, which is where all of our controllers are going to live. So let's go ahead and write a controller. So new file, mat controller, the controller. PHP. Okay, so this file will handle the request. So the route is going to find the controller. The controller is going to be the one that figures out the content and that kind of stuff. So again, I'm going to get some boilerplate here for the sake of time. So here is some boilerplate. So we've got PHP, some PHP doc blocks. Let's do mat. Namespace is mat. Use Drupal core. So we're going to, wherever you see use, that's just an alias. So wherever you see controller base used, for example down here, it's really going to say this would be like that, right? So it's a shorthand. So it's an alias. So it's saying use controller base as Drupal core controller base. You could also alias it as, like, hey, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you wanted to alias it as such, that's how you do it. So by omitting the as part, it just uses the last thing. So we're going to use Drupal's controller base because it provides some stuff. So we see here test controller extends controller base. So that's saying, here's my controller. We're going to go ahead and provide or extend the default Drupal controller because it has functions and stuff. So I've got some stuff in here that I'm going to get rid of because I was, again, working on this last night. So let's keep this simple for now. Bear with me. Oop. All right, so create content. Da, 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 da. Okay, so we have got a content function. So this is what what we'll use to put the content on the page. So I'm going to get rid of that as well. So to keep it very simple, Matt's page. All right, yeah, we gotta get rolling. 11:50. All right, so save it. All right, so let's see here. Test controller, Matt. There's a lot of moving pieces, so if I miss something, I apologize. Test controller, Drupal, that's going to be Matt. Test controller, content. Okay, oh, right here. This is a little weird. So to see this colon right here, or a double colon, that's a Symfony thing. That's not a PHP thing. That's basically saying, fire up this controller, and on demand, call this function. So don't worry about that. It's Symfony. But that's essentially we're saying this controller, call this function. Here is the title. So Matt, and we're saying access content. Okay, so it's similar to what we did before. All right, so let's see here. Drush, first let me clear. We saved everything. All right, let's do Drush, en. So I'm using Drush now. Drush, en, Matt. So my Drush version is a little out of date, so you'll see some nasty warnings. That's just because Drush is out of date. Ignore that. It should enable fine. Nope, looks like I missed something. So let's take a look. So test. Yep, yeah. So test controller.
Oh, that should be.
Yeah, I changed the namespace. I didn't change the controller. Yeah. So the good thing is here it normally tells us. So if we scroll up, this is a little small. If we scroll up, it'll normally say in the stack trace. So class Matt test controller does not exist. So it can't find it. All right. So let's see here. Namespace Matt controller test controller. Oh, and I am. There's your problem, folks. All right, so hold on. Let's see here. Source controller. All right, so come on. He is correct. All right. Yep. No, that's it. Right, because PSR maps it. So let's rename this to test controller. So good catch. Thank you very much. So refactor. All right. So now if we it might already be enabled. Okay, and let's do drush cache rebuild. It was CCL. Now in Drupal 8, it's cache rebuild. Okay, so if we go to our Drupal 8 site, and I think it was /Matt. All right, let's see here. Okay, so we've got, again, our simple module. I realize that this seems way more complex, but it's one of the things at scale, it will be less complex. So you have to do a lot more up front, but you'll thank it later on. All right, so we've got 6 minutes. I wanted to get into services, but I don't think I'll have time. Right here, does anybody have any questions about what we covered? Yes, sir. So the name. I'm sorry. Could you speak up a little bit? Sorry, one more time. Function on. Oh, okay. So if I were calling a function from another controller within this controller, okay. So yeah. So what you'd have to do is you'd either have to say use or do a fully qualified namespace. So for example, if I were to call a different controller here, it would have to be like Drupal. Drupal. These fingers are great, aren't they? So Drupal, other controller, right? And then the name of the controller.
And I assume then it's bad practice to pronounce it, say Drupal Matt, something like that on all your controllers. Say why that would be a bad idea.
For Drupal Mat controller,
Yeah, if I just left the namespace at Mat, why would that not work?
well,
Or would it?
it's again with PSR, right? All it's doing is mapping it. So if if I have multiple controllers in the controller namespace underneath Mat, so if I were to create another one, so Mat, I mean Mat isn't really a great name to begin with. Aside from that, that's an aside. But if I were to create another controller in this namespace, so other controller.php. All right, so test controller, Mat controller, other controller, controller base, other page. So let's see here. Let's change this routing real quick. All right, so we should see return line 15. It will work. Again, it's not obviously Mat isn't a great name, but again, PSR4 is just going to map namespaces to directories. So unless you had, if there was something you were digging at, was there something you were really digging at?
I imagine it's bad practice. Why would it be bad practice to leave it at Drupal right in the module? Why would I just add an additional controller part?
Oh, sorry, I got you now. Okay, so if you have services or something like that, so if you write a service or an event subscriber, you would have a different namespace. So Mat's the module, but you can have services. So it would be Drupal Mat service, right? And then you'd have a service, right? So even though it looks weird that I have controller, and then my thing is called controller, that's just because you can have within the source directory, you can have other things. So for example, down here, this was the one I'm working on last night. I had some event subscribers, which would be in my event subscriber namespace, right? So /module/thing. So it'd be /controller just by convention for controllers, but event subscribers, services. So /mat/controller, again, PSR4 is just looking at the directory structure. So you can have it as /controller and then the name of the controller. Does that make sense? Is that kind of okay? And, we've only got a little bit more time. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, let's get some lunch then. Thank you.